I got nothing in the will. A stranger's kindness made me richer than my entire family. The mahogany conference table stretched endlessly before me, its polished surface reflecting the cold fluorescent lights of the law office. I sat there, my hands trembling slightly as I stared at the pristine legal documents scattered before me. The scent of expensive leather chairs and old money hung heavy in the air, but today it felt suffocating. "Are you absolutely certain this is correct, Mr. Henderson?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The family attorney, a man who'd been handling our affairs for over 30 years, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and nodded gravely. "I'm afraid so, Marcus. Your grandfather's will is quite explicit." He cleared his throat and read aloud. "To my grandson Marcus Wellington, who has consistently shown a lack of appreciation for the family legacy and business acumen, I leave nothing. May this serve as a final lesson in responsibility." The words hit me like a physical blow. Around the table, my cousins shifted uncomfortably, but I could see the barely concealed satisfaction in their eyes. They'd always resented that I was grandfather's favorite, or so I thought. My cousin Bradley, ever the opportunist, couldn't hide his smirk as he pretended to study his own inheritance documents. "The estate, valued at approximately $47 million, will be divided equally among your 3 cousins," Mr. Henderson continued. "The family business, Wellington Industries, will be transferred to Bradley as the new CEO." I felt the blood drain from my face. This couldn't be happening. I'd spent my entire life believing I was being groomed to take over the family empire. Every summer working in the warehouses, every business dinner I'd attended, every sacrifice I'd made to maintain the family's reputation, it had all been for nothing. "There must be some mistake," I stammered. "Grandfather and I talked about this. He said the company would be mine when I turned 30. I'm 29 now. I was so close." "I'm sorry, Marcus," the attorney interrupted gently. "There's also this letter he left specifically for you." With shaking hands, I took the sealed envelope. The familiar cursive handwriting made my chest tighten. I tore it open and read the words that would haunt me for months to come. "Marcus, you've become everything I despise about this generation. Entitled, ungrateful, and soft. You think wealth is a birthright, not something to be earned. You've never fought for anything, never struggled, never appreciated what real hardship means. Perhaps losing everything will teach you what I could not. Prove to me, even in death, that you're worth the Wellington name." Grandfather, the room spun around me. 29 years of my life reduced to this moment of complete and utter rejection. I looked up to see my family's faces, some sympathetic, others indifferent, and a few barely hiding their glee. "This is insane," I said, standing abruptly. "I'm contesting this will. There's no way this is legal." "You're certainly within your rights to do so," Mr. Henderson replied. "However, I should mention that your grandfather anticipated this possibility. Any heir who contests the will forfeits their right to even the smallest family trust or inheritance in perpetuity. You'd be completely cut off, Marcus. No safety net whatsoever." The ultimatum was clear. Accept nothing or risk losing even the possibility of future family support. I felt trapped, suffocated by the weight of their expectations and judgments. "I need some air," I muttered. Pushing back from the table, I stumbled out of the law office into the bustling streets of downtown Chicago. The October wind cut through my expensive suit, a suit that suddenly felt like a costume I no longer deserved to wear. People rushed past me, absorbed in their own lives, while mine crumbled around me. For the first time in my life, I was truly alone. I walked aimlessly for hours, my mind reeling. The city that had once felt like my kingdom now seemed alien and hostile. Every familiar landmark reminded me of family dinners, business meetings, and a future that no longer existed. As evening fell, I found myself in a part of the city I'd Never explored a working-class neighborhood where the streetlights were dimmer and the buildings older. My feet had carried me to a small diner called Murphy's, its neon sign flickering weakly against the darkening sky. I hesitated at the entrance. This wasn't my world. I didn't belong here. But I also didn't belong anywhere else anymore. The bell above the door chimed as I entered. The diner was nearly empty, except for a few late-shift workers grabbing dinner. The smell of coffee and fried food was overwhelming after a day of not eating. I slid into a worn booth in the corner, trying to make myself invisible. "You look like you've had a day," said a warm voice. I looked up to see a woman in her 50s, wearing a faded uniform and carrying a coffee pot. Her name tag read Sarah. There was something in her eyes, not pity, but genuine concern. "I guess you could say that," I replied, managing a weak smile. "Well, honey, whatever it is, it can't be fixed on an empty stomach. What can I get you?" I realized I hadn't eaten since breakfast, and even then, I'd barely touched my food. "Just coffee, please. I'm not really hungry." She poured the coffee but lingered. "You know, I've been working here for 15 years, and I can spot someone who's lost from a mile away. You sure you don't want something to eat? The meatloaf's pretty good tonight." There was something about her kindness that broke through my defenses. "Actually, that sounds perfect." As she walked away, I pulled out my phone. 17 missed calls from my cousins, my parents, and various family friends. I turned it off. I couldn't face their questions, their false sympathy, or their judgment. "Not tonight." Sarah returned with the meatloaf, and to my surprise, it was delicious. Real, honest food that somehow tasted better than any of the expensive meals I'd grown up with. "Feeling better?" she asked, refilling my coffee. "A little," I admitted. "Thank you." "Sometimes life has a way of knocking us down when we least expect it," she said, wiping down the counter nearby. "But that doesn't mean we're out for the count." I found myself telling her everything. The will, the rejection, the feeling of being completely lost. She listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of understanding. When I finished, she sat down across from me. "You know what I think? I think maybe this is the best thing that could have happened to you." I stared at her in disbelief. How could losing everything be the best thing? "Because now you get to find out who you really are," she said simply. "Not who your family expected you to be, not who you thought you had to be, but who you actually are. That's a gift, honey. A scary one, but a gift nonetheless." Her words hit me harder than anything my grandfather had written. For the first time since leaving the law office, I felt something other than despair. It was small, fragile, but it was there, a tiny spark of possibility. As I prepared to leave, Sarah handed me a business card. "My son runs a community center about 6 blocks from here. They're always looking for volunteers. Maybe you'd be interested." I looked at the card. Riverside Community Center, building hope one person at a time. "I don't know if I have anything to offer," I said honestly. "Everyone has something to offer," she replied with a smile. "Sometimes we just need to find it." Walking out into the night, I felt different somehow. Lighter despite carrying the weight of my family's rejection. For 29 years, I'd been living someone else's vision of my life. Maybe it was time to create my own. 3 weeks later, I stood outside the Riverside Community Center, Sarah's business card worn soft from being handled so many times. The building was old but well-maintained, with colorful murals painted on the brick walls and the sound of children's laughter echoing from inside. I'd spent those 3 weeks in a studio apartment I'd rented with what little money I had left in my personal savings. No family trust, no credit cards backed by Wellington Industries, no safety net. Just me, figuring out how to live on a budget for the first time in my life. It had been terrifying and liberating in equal measure. "You must be Marcus," said a voice behind me. I turned to see a man about my age, tall and lean with calloused hands and an easy smile. "I'm David, Sarah's son. She told me you might be stopping by. She did she?" I found myself smiling. Sarah had a way of orchestrating things without making it obvious. "Come on, let me show you around." The community center was bustling with activity. In one room, elderly residents played chess and shared stories. In another, teenagers worked on homework with volunteer tutors. The gymnasium housed a basketball game that looked intensely competitive despite the players ranging in age from 8 to 80. "What do you think?" David asked as we completed the tour. "It's amazing," I said, and I meant it. "What kind of volunteers do you need?" "All kinds. We've got an after-school program that could use another tutor, a job training workshop that needs someone with business experience, and we're always looking for people to help with our community meals." Business experience. For the first time since the reading of the will, someone was suggesting that my background might actually be valuable for something other than making money. "I'd like to help with the job training," I said. "If you'll have me." That's how I found myself, 2 days later, standing in front of a group of 15 adults ranging from recent immigrants to former felons to people who'd been unemployed for months. They looked at me skeptically, and I couldn't blame them. Despite my efforts to dress down, I probably still looked like I'd never worked a real day in my life. "Good morning," I began nervously. "My name is Marcus, and I'm here to help with interview preparation and resume building." A woman in the front row raised her hand. "What kind of experience do you have?" It was a fair question, and one I'd been dreading. I could lie, make up some story about working my way up from nothing. But something about these people there. Honesty, their determination demanded truth. "Until 3 weeks ago, I worked for my family's company," I said. "I had everything handed to me. I never had to interview for a job, never had to worry about making rent, never had to struggle the way you're struggling now. But recently, I lost everything, and I'm learning what it means to start over." The room was quiet for a moment. Then, an older man in the back spoke up. "At least you're honest about it. Most rich folks who come in here want to pretend they understand us." His name was Jerome, and over the following weeks, he became my unofficial guide to a world I'd never known existed. He'd worked construction for 30 years before a back injury forced him into early retirement. Now at 58, he was trying to transition into office work. "The thing about starting over," Jerome told me one afternoon as we worked on his resume, "is that you get to decide what really matters to you. Most folks never get that opportunity." Working with Jerome and the others, I began to understand what Sarah had meant about finding out who I really was. Stripped of my family name and financial safety net, I discovered skills I never knew I had. I was good at explaining complex concepts simply. I had a knack for helping people identify their strengths. Most importantly, I found genuine satisfaction in watching someone land their first job in years. The breakthrough came when Maria, a single mother who'd been unemployed for 8 months, got hired at a local bank. She cried when she told us, and I found myself crying too. Her success felt more meaningful than any business deal I'd ever closed. "You know," David said to me that evening as we cleaned up the classroom, "you've changed since you started here." "How?" "So, you seem, I don't know, more real somehow. Like you're finally comfortable in your own skin." He was right. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to live up to someone else's expectations. I wasn't performing the role of the wealthy heir or the future CEO. I was just Marcus, helping people find jobs and occasionally getting my own hands dirty, fixing broken chairs or painting classrooms. 6 months after the will reading, I ran into Bradley at a coffee shop downtown. He looked stressed, tired in a way that expensive suits couldn't hide. "Marcus," he said, approaching my table cautiously, "how have you been?" "Good," I said, and meant it. "Really good." "How's running the company?" He laughed bitterly. It's harder than I thought. Grandfather made it look easy, but everything's falling apart. Stock prices are down, we're losing major clients, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to run the whole thing into the ground. I felt a pang of sympathy for him. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? He asked, studying my face. Because you don't look sorry, you look happy. I thought about it. I am happy. Happier than I've been in years. But you lost everything, he said, confusion evident in his voice. No, I replied, thinking of Sarah's kindness, Jerome's wisdom, Maria's tears of joy, and David's friendship. I found everything. I just didn't know I was looking for it. A year later, I stood before the Riverside Community Center's Board of Directors, presenting my proposal for a new program combining job training with small business development. I'd used my inheritance from my grandmother, a modest trust that grandfather couldn't touch to fund the initiative. Sarah was there, beaming with pride. Jerome had become the program's first success story, opening a small consulting business for construction safety. David had become my closest friend and business partner in this new venture. You know, Sarah said to me after the presentation, your grandfather might have been wrong about a lot of things, but he was right about one. What's that? You did need to learn what real hardship means. But more importantly, you needed to learn what real wealth is. I looked around the room at these people who had become my chosen family, at the walls covered with photos of program graduates, at the future we were building together. She was right. I was richer than I'd ever been when I had millions in trust funds. The greatest irony was that my grandfather had given me exactly what I needed to become the man he'd hoped I could be. He just hadn't done it the way either of us expected. Sometimes, losing everything you think you need is the only way to find what you actually need. And sometimes, the kindness of strangers can teach you more about wealth than a lifetime of privilege ever could. As I walked home that evening through the neighborhood that had become my true home, I passed Murphy's Diner. Sarah was there, as always, taking care of anyone who walked through the door. I waved through the window and she waved back, her smile worth more than all the money I'd ever lost. I'd gotten nothing in the will, but I'd gained everything that truly mattered. The END.
Thank you for watching this story unfold with us here on M&A The Story Unfolds. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. We'd love to know where you're watching. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of the world you're joining us from. Your support means everything. See you in the next story.